an understanding too. Love is a key. Love can open any door. So why should there be so much hate? Is that man is a fool to what he do not know? Like my good friend say, man to man is so unjust, and you don't know is who to trust. Be good to your brothers, be good to your sisters too. This was ordained to be done.
Grace and peace. This is your brother Yehuda Ben Isaiah, and today I decided to do a lesson titled The Apostle Paul, the Edomite, Hebrew. The Apostle Paul, the Edomite, Hebrew. Or Paul, Edomite, Ancestry. Paul's Edomite ancestry. Now we know that Paul, the Apostle Paul, was a Hebrew of the tribe of Benjamin. He said it. But according to scripture and history dealing with Josephus, the Apostle Paul also had Edomite ancestry. Okay, the Apostle Paul also had Edomite ancestry. So, the first place I'm going to go to prove that the Apostle Paul had Edomite ancestry is the book of Acts, chapter 9. I'm going to go into the KJV, Masoretic, and also the book of Josephus. So the first place I'm going to go to is the book of Acts. The book of Acts. The book of Acts, chapter 9 and verse 1. And it reads, And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest again. And Saul, because his name was Saul. Now when you go into the book of Josephus, it says that his name was Saul and Saulus, Saulas, inside the book of Josephus. One more time. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest. Okay, that's Acts 9, 1 and 1. Now let's read verse 2. And desire of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they be men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. It says that Saul went persecuting the church. Did not matter if there was men or women. It says that he brought these people bound unto Jerusalem. Now, let's go inside the book of Josephus. Let's go inside the book of Josephus and read the exact same accounts of Paul, and going to prove not only was he a Hebrew, but he also had Edomite ancestry. The first place I'm going to is Josephus, book 20. Book 20, chapter 9 and number 4. Book 20. Because the goal is to prove that Paul had Edomite ancestry. Josephus, who was an eyewitness a real ancient black Jew historian that lived in those times. The book of Josephus, book 20, chapter 9, 2, and Numbers. I'm going to read Numbers 2:14. Actually, I think I read 2:13 and 2:14. Numbers 2:13 and 2:14. It reads, and now Jesus, another Jesus, not the Messiah, and now Jesus, the son of Gamaliel, became the successor of Jesus, the son of Damnius, in the high priesthood, which the king had taken from the other, on which account a sedition arose between the high priest with regard to one another. For they got together bodies of the boldest sort of the people, and frequently came from reproaches to throwing the stones at each other. But Ananias was too hard for the rest by his riches, which enabled him to gain those that were most ready to receive. It says one more time, but Ananias, spelled Ananias, was too hard for the rest, but his riches, which enabled him to gain those that were most ready to receive. To gain those that were most ready to receive the gospel, because Ananias is the same man that Paul went to after Paul was blinded on his way to Damascus. Let's go now and read that in the KJV. Let's go inside the KJV, the book of Acts chapter 9. The book of Acts chapter 9. This is when Paul was sent to Ananias. I just read about him right here, right in the book of Josephus. One more time. It reads, but Ananias was too hard for the rest, but his riches, which enabled him to gain those that were most ready to receive, meaning receive the gospel. The book of Acts chapter 9. It says here, let's start at verse 11. And the Lord said unto him, this is when Paul was blinded, arise and go into the street, which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul. See, Saul, as Tarsus, for behold, he prayed. Verse 12, because he was blinded, and has seen in a vision a man named Ananias. I just read about him right here in the book of Josephus, coming in and putting his hand on him that he might receive his sight. Verse 13, and then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard by many of this man how much evil he has done to thy saints at Jerusalem, because I just read in the book of Josephus, one more time, it says that Ananias, which enabled him, he was a rich man, which enabled him to gain those that were most ready to receive the gospel. This is the man right here sent, that Saul or Paul was sent to. One more time. And then Ananias answered Christ, Lord, I have heard by many, this man, meaning Paul, how much evil he has done to thy saints at Jerusalem. And here he has the authority from the chief priest to bind all that call on thy name. But the Lord said unto him, go thy way. Talking to Ananias. I just read about him in the book of Josephus. Go thy way. For he, Paul, is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. So I just proved right here that Ananias is in the book of Acts. Let's go back inside the book of Josephus. Let's read a little more. Josephus, book 20, chapter 9. Let's continue. Let's read a little more. So we just read about Ananias. He was a rich man, which enabled him to gain those that were ready to receive. He's the same man that healed Paul. Let's continue. Costoburus, spelled Costobarus, Costoburus, also, and Saulus. Paul was also called Saulus. S-A-U-L-U-S. So Paul, which was Saul, okay, he was called Saul right here. When you go back to the book of Acts, chapter 9, verse 11, he was called Saul also, before his name was changed to Paul, right? So one more time it says, Costoburus also and Saulus, they did themselves get together a multitude of wicked wretches, and this because they were of the royal family. Paul was of the royal family. And so they obtained favor among them because of their kindred to Agrippa. Paul was related to Agrippa. He was a Hebrew, yes, but he was also an Edomite. He had Edomite ancestry. Let's continue to prove the case even more. Right? So it says, one more time, I just read about Ananias. He was a rich man, which enabled him to gain those that was ready to receive the gospel. That's why Paul went to Ananias to receive his sight, because Ananias was a follower of Christ. And it says, and Costoburus also and Saulus, meaning Saul, did themselves get together a multitude of wicked wretches because they was persecuting the church. And this because they were of the royal family. Paul was of the royal family. And so they obtained favor among them because of their kindred to Agrippa. So Paul also was related to Agrippa. But let's continue. Let's go now to Acts 9 and 4. Acts 9, verse 4. It reads, this is when Paul was blinded, and he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou? Because his name was Saul. Again, in the book of Josephus, his name was Saulus. He was called Saulus also. And Saul in the book of Josephus. Right now, let's go to Acts 26 and 14. Acts 26, and 14. Acts chapter 26, verse 14. It reads, and when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice. Paul is talking to Agrippa. When we were all falling to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecuted me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. So just showing you that Paul, also called Saul, also called Saulus in the book of Josephus. It says that he was related to Costoburus and says that he was a kindred of Agrippa. That's why it was easy for him to get out of certain situations, because Paul had clout. I'm going to show you as we continue. Paul had clout. Right? Another member of the Herodian dynasty Another member of the Herodian dynasty was another man, Custabar, who was the brother of Saul. He was the brother of Saul. His name was Custabar. Some scholars think this is the same guy, Custabarus. It says in the book of Josephus also, and Saulus. And it says they were of the royal family. And so they obtained favor among them because of their kindred to Agrippa. Now let's go to the book of Josephus again. Let's go back inside the book of Josephus. And let's go to book number 2. In the war section, book number 2, chapter 20. Book 2, chapter 20. Let's start here at number 556. It reads, and after this calamity had befallen Cestius, many of the most eminent of the Jews swarmed away from the city, as from a ship when it was going to sink. Custabarus, therefore, and Saul, which is Paul, who were brethren together with Philip. Philip was the brother of Herod Antipas. He was the brother. And Philip, the son of Jacomus, who was the commander of King Agrippa's forces, ran away from the city and went to Cestius. Okay? But again, it says Custabarus, therefore, and Saul, who were brethren together with Philip. Okay? Philip, and the son of Jacomus, who was the commander of King Agrippa's forces, ran away from the city, and they went to Cestius. Okay, they went to Cestius. But let's continue. But then how Antipas, Herod Antipas, who had been besieged with them in the king's palace, but would not fly away with them, was afterwards slain by the seditious. We shall relate hereafter. Number 558. However, Cestius sent Saul, meaning Paul, and his friends at their own desire to Archaea to Nero. Archaea to Nero, spelled Achia. Now let's go inside the book of Acts and see if this lines up. The book of Acts chapter 17. Acts 17. I'm going to read verses 14 and 15. Acts 17. Acts chapter 17, verses 14 and 15. Look what it says here. And then immediately the brethren sent away Paul, which is Saul, to go as it were to the sea, but Silas and Timothy abide there still. Verse 15. And they that conducted Paul brought him unto Athens, meaning Greece, and receiving a commandment unto Silas and Timothy for to come to him with all speed, they departed. Verse 16. Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, because he went to Athens. Now let's go to the book of Acts 18 and read verse 12. Acts chapter 18, verse 12. Now I just read here in the book of Josephus, it says one more time, however, Cestius sent Saul and his friends at their own desire to Archaea, to Nero, which is in Greece. Here's the book of Acts 18. Acts 18, verse 12. When Paul was in Greece, it says here, and when Gallio was the deputy See, at Achaia, the Jews made insurrection with one accord against Paul and brought him to the judgment seat. But showing you that Saul, mentioned right here in the book of Josephus, went to Achaia, Achia, in Greece, inside of Greece. Let's go now and read verse 27. The book of Acts 18:27. And it says here, and when he, meaning Paul, because he was with Aquila and Priscilla, the verse before, and when he was disposed to pass into Achaia, see, the brethren wrote exhorting the disciples to receive him, who when he was come helped them much which had believed through grace. Okay, but showing you how, just as it says in the book of Josephus, that Paul or Saul went to Greece and he went to a place called Achaia. It's spelled in the Bible, Achia. It's spelled in the book of Josephus, Achia. But it's spelled here one more time in the Bible, Achia. Okay? In the book of Josephus, Achia. Just lining it up, showing you that Paul was also a kindred of the Edomites as well as a Hebrew. Let's now go to back inside Josephus in the war section, book number 2, chapter 17, number 4. Let's start at right here, 4:18. It says here, so the men of power, perceiving that the sedition was too hard for them to subdue, and that the danger which would arise from the Romans would come upon them first of all, endeavored to save themselves, and sent ambassadors, some to Florus the chief, it says, of whom was Simon, the son of Ananias. I just read about him. He's the guy that helped Paul receive his sight. And others to Agrippa, among whom the most eminent were Saul and Antipas and Custoburus, who were of the king's kindred. It says that Saul was of the king's kindred. King Agrippa. Saul was related to King Agrippa. Saul had clout. That's why Saul was able to maneuver, get away with certain things, and also almost persuade Agrippa to become a follower of Christ. Because Paul was also part Edomite. He was part Edomite, right? I'm proving it as I go. Now where I want to go next here, to continue to prove that Paul was part Edomite. Okay, yeah, I know I want to go. Let's go to the book of Acts 13 and 1. Acts 13 and 1. The book of Acts chapter 13, verse 1. Let's read that real quick here. It reads, now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers of Barnabas and Simeon that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod. This guy named Manaen was brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, meaning he was the governor. That's what it means. The Tetrarch means governor. Herod the governor, because Herod was the governor, and Saul. He was brought up with Herod and Saul. So Saul, Herod the Edomite, and this guy Manaen was all brought up together. One more time. It says one more time. Now there were in the church that was in Antioch certain prophets and teachers of Barnabas and Simeon that were called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, meaning Herod the governor, etc., and Saul. So Saul, Herod the Edomite, and Manaen was all brought up together. I don't believe that, Judah. Well, let's go back in Josephus now. Let's go to Josephus. Let's go back in Josephus. Let's go to book 15. Book 15. Let's go to book 15. I just read about this guy Manaen in the book of Acts. In the book of Acts, I just read about him, right? Spelled Manaen, that he, Herod the Tetrarch, meaning Herod Antipas, and Saul was all brought up together. Now let's go, which is Paul, all brought up together. Now let's go to book number 15. I think I want chapter 10 here. Book 15, chapter 10, 5. We're going to read number 373 and jump down to 377. Number 373, the antiquities of the Jews. Book 15, chapter 10, 5, number 373. Look what it says here. Now there was one of these Essenes, because remember, many of the Edomites became Jews, practicing Jews. Now there was one of these Essenes whose name was Manahem. And now in the book of Josephus, it's spelled Manahem. Manahem. In the book of Acts, his name is spelled Manaen, but it's the same guy. Let's jump down now to number 377. It says, now at that time, Herod did not at all attend to what Manahem said, because this guy told Herod that he would become a king. Now let's go back to Acts. It said in the book of Acts, chapter 13, verse 1, it says that Manaen, which I just read about in Josephus, which had been brought up with Herod, just read about him in Josephus, and Saul, all brought up together. They was all brought up together. One more time right here. And it says, now at that time, Herod did not at all attend with Manahem, just read about him right here in Acts 13:1, said, as having no hopes of such advancement, but a little afterward, when he was so fortunate as to be advanced to the dignity of king, you see, and was in the height of his dominion, he sent for Manahem, because they was friends. They was brought up together, as it reads here in the book of Acts 13. They was brought up together. His friend Manahem, right? And asked him how long he should reign. And Manahem did not tell him the full length of his reign. Wherefore, upon the silence of his, he asked him further whether he should reign 10 years or not. So Manahem, which is also Manaen in the Bible, spoke to Herod about how long he would reign as king, the Edomite king, right? It says here, one more time, and Manahem did not tell him the full length of his reign. Wherefore, upon that silence of his, he asked him further whether he should reign 10 years or not. He replied, yes, 20, nay, 30 years, but did not assign the just determinate limit of his reign. Herod was satisfied with these replies and gave Manahem his hand and dismissed him, because they was friends, right? One more time in the book of Josephus, his name is spelled Manahem. In the book of Acts 13:1, his name is spelled Manaen. It says that he, Herod, before he became king, and Paul, which is Saul, all grew up together. They grew up together. But Judah, Paul said he was a Hebrew of the Hebrews. He said he was of the tribe of Benjamin. He did say that. But did you know also, I'm not saying that Paul did not have Hebrew ancestry, but did you know also when you read the book of Josephus, Josephus tells you that when the Assyrians took the Jews into captivity and replaced them with those Samaritans, those people that was placed in the land, they became known as the Samaritans. You know what Josephus said about these Samaritans? That many times they would pretend to be from a tribe of Israel. And when they saw Israel was doing bad, wasn't prospering, and when God was kicking their ass, then they would tell the people that they were not Israelites. But it says that when the Jews was prospering and doing good, they would tell people that they were from a tribe. Just like today, you have people claiming to be tribes that's not Israel. So I'm not saying that Paul was a Jew. I'm not saying that. Or if he was or not. I'm not saying that. But I'm telling you that he had Edomite ancestry also. You can go do the research on your own. Now let's continue. Where I want to go next. Let's go to Romans 16. But I just showed you in the book of Acts 13:1 that Menahem, just read about this guy, and Josephus was good friend with Herod, that Menahem and Saul, which is Paul, they all grew up together. All three of them, they grew up together. Now let's go to Romans 16:21. Yeah, Romans 16:21. Romans 16:21. Real quick here. Romans 16:21. Look what it says here. Right? Timothy. Paul is talking, right? Timothy, my work fellow. Because what he's doing now, he's saluting people. He's saluting people. Look what it says here. Timothy, my work fellow, and Lucius, and salute Jason, and Sosipater, my kinsman. This guy named Sosipater, Sosipater. Again, Sosipater. Paul says, salute this guy. He's my kinsman. Now, let's go to the book of Josephus. Let's go to the book of Josephus, 14:10-22. Let's go to book 14. The book of Josephus, 14, chapter 10. Chapter 10, 22. And let's read Numbers 2:48 and 2:49. In fact, no, just 2:49. I don't need to read 2:48. 2:49. And Aristobulus, look what it says here. Matter of fact, let's start at 2:48 to get a little context. And since the nation of the Jews and their high priest Hyrcanus, sent as the ambassadors to them. Now let's jump down to number 249, because we know that Hyrcanus, he subdued the Edomites and they converted, became Jews, right? Number 249. And Aristobulus, he was an Edomite, the son of Amtus, and Sosipater, the son of Philip. See, Sosipater, the son of Philip. Philip was the brother of Herod Antipas. Now let's go back and see if what Paul says. Paul says, salute Sosipater, my kinsman. Sosipater, in the book of Romans, he was the son of Philip. He's the guy that Herod took his wife, his brother's wife, and John the Baptist said, you cannot have your brother's wife, Philip, your brother's wife. This is the guy right here. In fact, let's go to Luke 3:19 real quick. Read about Philip. Luke 3:19 real quick. To read about Philip, the brother of Herod. Luke 3:19. Luke chapter 3, verse 19. Look what it says here. But Herod the Tetrarch, I just read about him in Josephus, being also the book of Acts, I think it was 13. But Herod the Tetrarch, being reproved by him for Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, and for all the evils which Herod had done, added yet this above all, that he shut up John the Baptist in prison, because John the Baptist told him, it is unlawful for you to have your brother's Philip's wife. Philip, one more time. But Herod the Tetrarch, it said, being reproved by him, meaning John the Baptist, for Herodias, his brother's Philip's wife. Philip. Now let's go back to the book of Josephus. Look what it says one more time. And Aristobulus, the son of Amtus, and Sosipater, the son of Philip. He was the son of Philip. Sosipater was the nephew of Herod. He was the nephew of Herod. Now let's go back. Romans 16. One more time. Paul says, salute Sosipater, my kinsman. Salute you. Now let's go back a few verses as Paul salutes, as he salutes those in the faith of Christ. Romans 16. Romans 16. Verse 11. Look what Paul says here. Salute Herodian, my kinsman. Just more confirmation. Salute Herodian, my kinsman. Greet them that be of the household of Narcissus, which are in the Lord. He says, salute Herodian, my kinsman. How much more evidence do you need? Paul had Edomite ancestry. Now, I'm not saying that Paul was a full-blooded Edomite. Not saying that. I'm just telling you, Paul had Edomite ancestry. Ain't no getting around it. You can go do the research on your own. Let's go to the book of Philippians real quick here. Let me show you guys something else. Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, verses 22 and 23. In fact, let's read 21 through 23. Look what Paul says here. Salute every saint in Christ Jesus. The brethren which are with me greet you. All the saints salute you. Chiefly they that are of Caesar's household. Paul says salute all of those of Caesar's household. Caesar, the emperor of Rome. Salute all of those of Caesar's household. The grace of our Lord Yeshua the Christ be with you all. Amen. But I just want to show you that verse also to show you that not only did Paul have Edomite ancestry, that he was teaching of the Gentiles. He says salute all of those of Caesar's household, because Paul taught in Rome. But I'm showing you that he also had Edomite ancestry. He had Edomite ancestry. Now let me show you something else about Paul. Paul had political clout. Paul had clout. The book of Acts 23 and 23. This is also how you know that Paul had Edomite ancestry and was related to Herod the Antipas, as I just showed you, right? Acts 23:23. It says here, verse 23, and he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen, and 70 and spearmen, 200, and the 3rd hour of the night. So it says, take these people to escort Paul to safety. Because remember, the Jews was trying to kill Paul. So he says right here, then the chief captain, then this was when Paul was put in prison. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who has something to say unto thee. Then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, what is that thou hast to tell me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldst bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them. He said, don't take Paul down there, because they trying to kill Paul. For there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed Paul. See? And now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart and charge him, see, he tell nobody. Verse 23, and he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers. 200 soldiers to escort one man. 200 soldiers to escort Paul. Make ready 200 soldiers and horsemen and 70 and spearmen, 200 spearmen. In the 3rd hour of the night, and they helped escort Paul out of the city, because they knew the Jews wanted to kill Paul. That's how we know also that Paul was an Edomite or part Edomite, because he had political clout. He had political clout. I know it's hard to believe for many of you, but Paul had Edomite ancestry. Not saying again that he was a full-blooded Edomite. I'm not saying that. Okay? I'm not saying that at all. But I want to read something. I want to read something else right here concerning Paul real quick. Real quick here. There's something else I want to touch bases on. I'm not saying that Paul was a full-blooded Edomite. I'm not saying that, right? It reads here, Paul was originally a Herodian. Not saying he was full-blooded, though. By Herodian, I mean that he seems to have connections with the family and court of Herod, as I showed you in Josephus and the Bible. It says, theologically, Saul, which is Paul, favored the theology of the Pharisees. We know he was a Pharisee. Many of the Edomites also was Pharisees, folks, not just the Jews. That's a fact. Before his conversion, but his family connections relate him to the inner circle of Herod Agrippa, as I just showed you. I showed you in the Bible and in the book of Josephus. Another reason why we know that Paul had Edomite ancestry. Saul or Paul was highly educated. He was a highly educated man. We know this. That's why he spoke fluent Greek. When you read the book of Josephus, Josephus said most of the Jews did not speak Greek. Josephus said that language was a very hard language. It says one more time, Saul and Paul was highly educated, both in the Hebrew scripture tradition, but also in Greek philosophy. He seems familiar, for example, with Plato's Timaeus. He is a Hebrew, but he also dabbles in Gentile learning and culture. This is the Herodian style. Jewish identity, loyalty to Jerusalem, familiar with the priest, but appreciative of Gentile power. Okay? Another reason why many scholars believe that Paul had Edomite ancestry. Paul or Saul was a Roman citizen. Jews were not typically citizens. They said most Jews was not Roman citizens. Most Jews did not want nothing. They didn't want nothing to do with Rome. That's a fact. We learned that Saul or Paul gained his Roman citizenship by birth. This means that his parents were Hebrews with Roman privileges. See, Roman privilege. In the first century, Hebrews with Roman privilege were linked to the Roman appointed rulers of Palestine, the Herods. Let me read that one more time. In the first century, the Hebrews with Roman privilege were linked to the Roman appointed rulers of Palestine, the Herods, meaning the Herodians. That's why Paul says, salute. Salute the Herodians, my kinsmen. Salute all these other people that was Edomites, my kinsmen. Like I read, let's go back to the book of Acts 13 one more time. How he grew up. He and this guy and Meniam, one more time, and Herod, they all grew up together. One more time, then I'm going to end it. Acts 13:1. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger, and Lucius and Cyrene, and Manaen, I read about him in the book of Josephus, which had been brought up with Herod and Saul. They was brought up together. Saul's at Edomite ancestry, folks. Now, whether you want to believe it or not, it's in it right here. The book of Acts 13 and verse 1 is undeniable. Undeniable. Acts 13 verse 1 is undeniable. It said that Saul, Herod the Tetrarch, meaning Herod Antipas, right? The king of or the governor, whatever, of Judea, that the Romans appointed. It says that Manaen, I read about him in Josephus, Herod and Saul grew up together. Paul grew up together. Now, like I said, you could take it as you want. It's undeniable. Josephus said it, how he helped persecute the church. His name was Saulus and Saul. He helped persecute the church. It's the same man. The same man that's in the book of Acts and Josephus. Paul, Saul, the same person. With that, I say grace and peace. I may do a part 2 on this subject a little later in the future. But other than that, grace and peace. Shalom.